Welcome to AI for You. Today's use case is about mapping your AI opportunities by breaking down your daily workflows. We all have tasks and processes that we repeat every week, and many of us haven't taken the time to really look at where AI could step in and help. Use the prompt in the show notes to have your LLM of choice look at your current business and workflows and help you identify where AI innovation can create more value than just efficiency optimization. Today, I have the pleasure of talking with Professor Dan Keating. Dan is a clinical associate professor of information systems and AI at the University of Rochester's Simon Business School. Before moving into higher ed, Dan spent years in the enterprise software world working with major brands on marketing technology, analytics, and change management. He's brought all of that experience into how he's leading AI integration at Simon, from faculty grants and staff training to student orientation and corporate partnerships. Let's jump right into the conversation. So Dan, thank you so much for joining me today on the show.
Thank you, Brian. I've been looking forward to this.
So you've had an interesting kind of career arc from enterprise technology into higher ed leadership. So what did that transition and your previous experience teach you about how to start operationalizing AI and what goes right and what goes wrong, especially in higher ed?
I was in the enterprise software business for a long time, mostly around marketing software and analytics software. I worked for .coms. I worked for big publicly traded companies. I worked for startups. I worked with usually very big clients. You know, the lesson in all of that is applicable in a pre-AI world, the lesson that is applicable in a post-AI world is that many of the tenets of those of good project change management and leadership and those kinds of things, they haven't changed. So much of what you learn in those experiences, you learn through failure, you learn through not getting it quite right, requirements, challenges with prototypes. You learn the hard way that you need to build these systems that are self-monitoring or giving notifications around when the system's not really working. Good requirements. Why are we doing this? And then not only did we build a good product, but are people actually using it? Did we build enough into the project in terms of adoption, training, and you're asking people to change how they do their work? And so have we done enough thinking about the post rollout phase? All those lessons from enterprise software are still relevant in the AI world. It's just that the risk profile of what's going on with those projects have changed. But when I look at my project maps, they're really not a whole lot different.
Interesting. And it seems like, one of the bigger differences is the scale of things because, AI, when a new software tool comes in, it's usually typically very focused on one narrow field or feature or function, whereas AI seems to cross over so much. I see a lot of people that get like that AI paralysis where it's like overwhelming for them.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the big challenges, one of the things that's markedly different about it is the QA process has to be quite a bit different because there is absolutely no risk in an old database-driven model of asking the database a question and it returning something that's not in the database. That's just not how databases have worked. You've now got to think about, well, this thing can hallucinate, this thing can go off the rails, it can make connections to things that we did not intend, and it really changes how risky it is to roll the thing out, and what might it do differently, and have we accounted for that enough? What is the danger if it gives an answer that's unanticipated, and how might we change how it works in order to ensure, like if we determine that that's a big problem, if it gives an answer that we did not intend and that's a big problem, well, how are we going to put a human in the loop to figure out how to head those kinds of things off? So it really is quite a bit different from a QA and execution standpoint. And I also really want to give some love to the QA people. They've always had a hard job. Their deadlines always got squeezed. And now I think it's harder.
Yeah, and it's really, I think AI as it's democratized like development and made everyone to a degree, much more involved in the functions and creations of these systems, building of like these mini models. You're dealing with a lot of people who haven't historically had to face this like development life cycle and the testing and the iteration. And as you mentioned earlier, the failure, like you will fail when you start learning AI. And that's very difficult for some people who are used to like doing their job the way they've always done it and not having to deal with that like failure because the tool went off the rails.
Right. Yeah, it had predictable results before, and now it doesn't always have predictable results. It's also really hard because you're okay, so let's pull that apart a little bit. So you hit on a really important point, which is around how do I build a team to do this stuff when people just haven't done it very much? It's got a different set of risks. It's got a different set of requirements, a whole different set of tools. So how do we actually upskill and find people that have done this? And that's a fun part of teaching in the MBA world, is showing them that you can take a particularly good DBA and their thought process, or a particularly good product manager who has a real curiosity to them. That's going to work in this world. And of course, there's room on the team for all kinds of different brains. But taking a statistics major and putting them into this and seeing what they do, matching them with a humanities major who thinks about things in a much different way, or somebody who was a philosophy major, let me sign them up because they're going to think about different questions and that kind of thing. So how do you upskill the team? That's an important piece. But what are the questions you're asking, and how are they different than the predictable ones and zeros that we had before? More than anything, I want critical thinkers, curious people, but also people that aren't going to get bogged down in their own curiosity. You can always find reasons not to do these things. You have to find people that, really want to execute if it makes sense, but aren't afraid that, okay, we have a new roadblock. We need to think of this differently. How should we deal with these new realities? You need willing people.
Yeah, and I think that culture of learning and experimenting is super critical when you start working with AI. And like you mentioned, I see much more like progress quickly when people work in groups, when they have different people with different ideas, different prompting, different tastes and judgment of the outputs. It has a huge impact on like how quickly you start iterating and coming up with new ideas.
I totally agree. I love a diverse team, diverse in thought, diverse in every way. I want some introverts and some extroverts, some STEM people and some more right-brained thinkers, and just put them all in a room. And I mean, that's the central lesson of the MBA. I teach in an MBA program, and the central lesson of the MBA is you've got these very difficult problems, and you are not going to solve them yourself. And you try to solve it yourself, and you can't. And then you get people in a room that are more or less rowing the same direction, and you can piece it together. It's a little bit like a crossword, in that in the crossword puzzle, you look at it and you think, I just don't have this thing. And then you get one little piece and you can build on that, and it goes from there, and it starts to gain momentum. And that's really the importance of the team right there.
Well, and I love what you have done at the business school, because you've really led the way in a lot of aspects on AI integration. And you started right off with not only educating the students about the opportunities, but educating the instructors and the staff and the support team. Can you talk a little bit about what that work actually looks like across all those different channels and groups?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. So first of all, this all starts with executive enthusiasm. When I put up the graphic of all the things that we've done at the business school in terms of AI, there's one little piece of it that's in a different color, which is executive buy-in, which is, hey, they said ChatGPT came out end of 22. And by 23, we had a new initiative up and running, and it was Go. And that doesn't come from me. That comes from the dean of the school saying, look, we're a small school. We are nimble. We've got a history of doing cutting edge things. This is a moment, and we're going to go. You put a bunch of academics in the room, and they might just want to wait for the data and read the papers and then make an informed decision. And we said, yeah, we're going to do that too, but we also let's go and here are the tools and resources to do it. So what did that look like? You're absolutely right that it was more than just, hey, we're doing AI now. We had to go train everybody. We started with the faculty, and the faculty has a tendency, if you say, do you know this new thing? The faculty is going to say, oh, of course I do. And we said, yes, of course you know everything about this. But let's just start at the beginning anyway. And so we just did really foundational work in training them on what this new generative AI thing was and how they might use it and that kind of thing. The other thing that we did around the faculty, before I get on to the staff and the alumni and the students and those kind of things, we matched a donor to a need. And a donor had said, we want to fund innovative work. And so we created grants for the faculty members to integrate AI into their courses immediately. And this was in 2023. So this is like literally March of 2023. We're up and running with this thing. And so what we were essentially doing was paying the faculty member to learn about this and integrate it into their class in a meaningful way. And in order to get that money, and here was the key, they had to do an education session for their fellow peers. So in order to get that check, you had to get up in front of them for 10 minutes at a meeting and just say, look, this is what we did with AI. This is what worked. This is what didn't work. This is what I would do differently the next time. Here's why it was meaningful. Here's how the students responded to it. So essentially, we got the faculty going, but then we had the faculty start to train each other on real use cases across a broad range of accounting, finance, statistics, communications, economics, all the things that we do in business school. So we had the faculty training the faculty, which really seemed to work well. Next, we did the staff, and the staff was, hey, here's how you might use this in admissions, in career management, IT, that sort of thing. And we ran like literally hands-on sessions with exercises that helped them to envision how they might do it. That was a lot of fun and seemed to work pretty well. And, again, always a part of those sessions is, who's been doing something really interesting in AI recently? Tell us about it. And they learn as much from their peers as they do from the person leading it. The students, we then, on their way into the program, so as part of orientation, we gave them and continue to give them. So now we're a few years into this thing. We still do it. The content has changed a bit. It's matured. But, what is this thing? How do you use it? How do you use it responsibly? What is an academic integrity violation? What isn't? How might you use this to do things? Because, particularly at the beginning in 23, we had some people that had never used it before. They might have come from countries where it wasn't allowed, or they just might not have used it. That has completely changed. So my first survey question at the beginning of those sessions is, how much have you used generative AI? And it's now 80% and above is I use it all the time. Whereas 3 years ago, that was 20% I use it all the time. But still, there's some that haven't. So that's how we did it with the students as well. And then alums, we work with companies come to us and say, hey, we'd love to borrow a professor for an afternoon for our offsite, and have them lead us through a discussion on how we might use AI or train some of our staff and those kinds of things. I'm constantly doing that. So it's a very long answer, but it's a very big question. And honestly, that was the short version of that answer.
Yeah, I'm sure we could dive into any one of those different groups in further detail. You talk about the fact that AI is not just a tool, right? It's not just another software tool. It's really creating a new infrastructure for thought. I think those were your words. How has that changed how you think about problem solving in higher ed?
Yeah, it's the same in higher ed as it is everywhere. I will get specific with higher ed, but I have to talk about it as a whole before I get into higher ed. Every time somebody says AI is this new tool, I stop them and say it's not a tool, it's an agent. A tool is a database. A tool does that thing that you designed it to do, and it doesn't do other things. Now, occasionally you get a use like you make a hammer and it hammers in nails or it takes out nails. You could also use it as a paperweight. Like there are unintended uses of these things. But in general, a tool does what you designed it to do. AI is not a tool, it's an agent. It has agency. It can go and do things. It can make decisions. It can stitch a correlation through and find connections where it didn't have them before. And so how is that useful in education? The use cases are limitless. Identifying students during the application process that might be ripe for intervention. It's the same as marketing, right? When do we reach out to a customer that before we lose them? I don't want to hear that we've lost a customer. I want to intervene before that happens, and you can use AI to do that in very similar ways. The other thing that we work on with the people in higher education, now we're going to get very specific. We work on what are your workflows? What do you do every day? Just break them down into simple steps, and then let's just start asking which of those steps AI can help with. Like whatever you do, admissions, career counseling, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, where can AI help you do it? And this is as much about thinking as it is about use cases. We encourage them to be creative about what they do, and also not just accept what it did this time that you tried it, and just learn how to keep pushing at it, and maybe shelve it and try it again in 6 months and see what happens, because the frontier is constantly changing. We've had people set up custom GPTs around the student application process. We've had them set up custom GPTs to do mock interviews if you're in the career counseling area and you're trying to help people land internships and jobs. Showed them how to fish and let them figure out how they might use it. And then, and I'll wrap up on this, this is my favorite part. It's so simple to add an agenda item to every single one of your team meetings in the last 5 minutes of the meeting. Hey, who did something interesting in AI this week? And tell us about that. And you just get your team talking about what's possible and very specific to their roles.
Yeah, I think once you launch people onto this journey, or you expose them to something that really adds value in a way that they hadn't seen before with this technology, I think that's when you get them. I think a lot of times, I don't know, I run into a lot of people both on the student, the faculty, and the staff side who are very AI hesitant or either see it as a threat or a shortcut. What do you think people most often get wrong about AI? And I loved the grants for the faculty. It was a brilliant idea. How else do you deal with that when it is, students who either have like problems with the environmental issues or the cheating issues, because that's how, it was originally introduced to them as a way to cheat, or staff members who are just hesitant to make any sort of big change and are very satisfied with the way that their jobs have always gone?
Yeah, it's a very complex question, because the people that are critics of it are right. It does have environmental concerns, major ones, and it can really dramatically affect the learning process. We learn by making mistakes. We learn by struggling. That's why higher ed is such an important place, because it's a really safe space to make those mistakes, to have an idea that is completely out of reach and you're struggling for the words and you're piecing it together. That's where magic is happening. And if we remove that ability from the process, because AI can give a B+ answer, Where does that struggle happen? It's really important not to try and talk people out of their objections to it because they're right. And also, it's not going to help anybody. So, how do we work with those objections? And because I deeply believe, I still think about this question all the time. How do you create an expert in the age of AI? Because your expertise is created by all of your education and all of your experience and all of your struggle and your mistakes and your failures and your inspirations that come when you're walking the dog. They come when you're doing dishes, like that human stuff still needs to happen. And the best way for that to happen is struggling through your work. If you know a musical instrument or something, you're constantly trying things that are harder and you get better at it. And if AI is removing the difficulty of things, how do you create that expertise? So we've just added a whole new layer to how education has to work because the old ways, the Socratic methods, the testing, the spacing out while reading, all of that stuff has an incredible amount of value to build the ability to ask the right questions. And that's the thing that you need in AI. So when it comes to the skeptics, we've got to meet them at their skepticism and nudge them along. And the way that we're doing that, we're now thinking of AI in three very distinct pieces: course, classroom, and career. So course, what is an instructor doing to utilize AI to make their jobs better? How can I use this to help me write an assignment, to do a little grading bot, create a syllabus, help me write a use case, that sort of thing. So what am I doing to help me run my course? Second one, classroom. What am I actually doing in the classroom that involves AI as a pedagogical way to teach, to transfer knowledge? And then the third one is career. So career, how might a person who is in that field actually use AI out in the world? How would an accountant use AI? How would somebody who's in finance use AI, somebody in IT, et cetera, et cetera? And so we're now thinking course, classroom, and career, and where does AI plug in each of those areas?
So we know that higher ed is in a massive state of flux right now, right? We're facing all sorts of challenges just beyond even AI with, the enrollment cliff and all sorts of, perception of the value of higher ed and people wanting more experiential, like all, hands-on kind of learning. If you could wave a magic wand and reimagine what higher ed looks like and what purpose it serves and how the students could really get the most value out of the time and money that they invest. What sort of things do you think about as far as the future of higher ed goes?
Yeah, I think you hit it with the experiential word. The flipped classroom has made a lot of sense to me over the years because that communication that's happening in a group of people cannot really be replicated. And that's what people have to get better at doing. So that experiential work, we've changed really the way we grade people too. And we told them this in their incoming workshops that they do with me on AI. I get a couple slides up there that essentially say, hey, look, we know that you're using AI on your assignments. So all of them are going to come in at virtually the same quality. All right. So the way, if you care about your grade and if you care about learning, we have to change the emphasis on discussion, classroom participation, presentations, things that are essentially AI proof. Because that's where the learning needs to happen more, because I can't rely on the struggle happening outside of the classroom. I have to, in some ways, up the struggle level in the classroom to really create those experiential situations that will help build their expertise. The mistakes need to happen in the classroom.
A lot of talk about students and the teaching and learning side of things. On the administrative side of things, where do you see changes happening in places like HR and finance and marketing, those sort of different areas that will help move the institution forward?
Yeah, it starts with human expertise. The AI gives a B plus, and how does the human being make sure that the AI B plus becomes an A when a human works with it? That's what still needs to happen. And this is something I'm working on a lot, and I don't have a great answer for it, honestly, because we have to be able to articulate what we're good at as humans and what value we bring to it in HR, in accounting, in all those things that you mentioned. And I'm not sure we have the language for that, to be able to take a look at the work that AI gave and the work that I did without AI and talk about the delta between them and talk about why my shepherding of that work as a human through an AI process is going to be an additive, valuable thing. We're all going to have to get good at articulating that because our clients, our bosses are going to look for savings. That's what they do. And they're going to say, wait a minute, I can get a B plus out of this thing. Yes, your work is very good, but your work is even better if you're taking your expertise and adding AI to it. So the basic saying is that your cardiologist will not be replaced by AI, but your cardiologist who knows AI will replace your cardiologist who doesn't know AI. So it's really up to us to get higher in the Maslow's pyramid and make sure that those human level qualities are being added well to the process. And I'm not sure we have that language yet. We've got to really work on that.
Yeah, and I think so much of that comes from people in those positions using the tools and seeing how to transform those B pluses into A pluses by adding their particular expertise or experiences, and then being able to, as you said, articulate that in a way that protects their job and their value, but then also looking for opportunities to take that time that they've saved and reinvest that into more of that same kind of unique human focused relationship building type of work.
That's absolutely right. I've been around for a while. My career started in the early 90s and it started in tech. We've always been told with each technological shift that we were going to have more time to do higher level stuff. And I've just never seen it happen. What we have done is we've become way more productive. We just produce a lot more than we used to. That's what the technology has enabled us to do. I think we are at a unique moment where it is imperative on us to get good at articulating why we need to do that higher level stuff and why our expertise really matters. And I think that's a really important step for all of us to take. And frankly, I think we need to do it proactively. I'm not sure our bosses and our clients are going to ask us to do that. I think they're just going to cut. And so you sort of have to get ahead of it and really start to show your bosses and clients why this is more valuable with a human adding to it.
I often think about the 40-hour work week, and now that we're able to scale so much with AI, we hear about AI brain fry, and I find myself doing, creating much more, but my time is much more cognitively demanding because now I'm not doing any of the monotonous kind of brainless work, right? Everything I'm doing is very thoughtful and strategic and judging and grading and taste. And it by the end of the week, I'm wiped out. But then there's so many other things that I need to like learn and do. And it's overwhelming. And I think we're going to see some downstream impact of that sort of scale as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's like we almost need to create a little bit more space in our days for recharging. Because honestly, it's a tough sell to a boss, but I get my best ideas when I'm not sitting at my desk, when I'm not staring. Now, sometimes when I'm staring at my screen, I have a breakthrough, but more often than not, it does come when I'm walking the dog. And particularly if I'm not listening to a podcast while I'm doing that, and I just create a little bit of space. And that's the kind of stuff that we have to figure out, that human stuff that really allows us to move up the pyramid I think that's a really important thing. So take some music lessons or learn a sport you've never learned before. I think that's a vital part of like I'm terrified of poetry, so I should go learn a lot about poetry because it's just going to make me grow. And I think that stuff has to become more important if we're to continue developing and continue adding value that AI cannot do.
You know, you mentioned space, our need for creating that space. And I think AI is a technology that really fills space because I find myself multitasking more than ever, where I'll have, three different browser windows with three different LLMs running different projects. And I'm like, did I already run that deep research prompt or where was that? What's that other thing that I'm working on right now? And it's just like constantly, cognitively engaged. So by the end of the day, I'm ready to check out, but I know that my agents are still working on things. So I want to go check in on them. So
I do that too. I literally did it yesterday. Like I had an agent working on creating a sample data set for me that needed a lot of guidance and it took a lot of time to do. So I used another LLM to do the thing that I needed to do while it was doing this other thing. And maybe I should have just gone and taken a walk.
right. Yeah. So the question I always finish with is what like particular AI use case is the most helpful or useful to you, either in your personal or professional life?
Yeah. In my professional life, it's the grading bots that I made. I had a real challenge with myself, and I kind of went to some of the deans and said, is this okay? Like, is this all right? So first of all, I was explicit with my students that I was doing it, because if they need to tell us that we're using AI on the work product, we need to tell them that we're using it too. But what I came down to was, it's way better at reading handwriting than I am. And we're doing much more Blue Book tests because they're AI proof. It gives a level of feedback that I just don't have time to do. So I've got a few hundred students. It's giving a very thorough response to what they did in a way that I would only be able to write a few lines of feedback. And ultimately, the third piece of that is that it's my name on the grade. And so I have to make sure that this thing is saying something like what I would say. It's me signing off on it. I got to proof it. I got to make sure it's within bounds. I got to make sure the distribution is right. Here's an A level, here's a C level. Is that right, or did it flip them and give the wrong grades and that sort of thing? But those grading bots, particularly on handwritten essays, have really helped.
How do you get the essays in there? Do you scan them or take pictures of them?
Yep.
Or
We've got a team that helps with that kind of thing, and they scan them in, and then I can take the download of that scan. And believe me, this is all private. I don't use I don't put their names on it. I cut their names out of it. It really does save a lot of time. And most importantly, it's consistent and it gives a deeper level of feedback. And look, I have instructed that LLM. It takes a long time to set it up right and a whole bunch of trial and error to make sure that it is grading the way that I would, and it's recognizing the qualities in the material that I want it to recognize, or it's recognizing strengths and weaknesses. It's me signing off on it, but
Right.
it definitely has improved that. And that's the only part of the job that's painful anyway, is the grading. Rest of it's quite enjoyable. So,
Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show, Dan. If our listeners want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
yeah, find me on LinkedIn and we'll go from there. It's Dan Keating in Rochester. And I really enjoyed this conversation, Brian. Let's do it again. I could talk to you all day.
Absolutely.
Love
It
your
sounds
work.
great. Thanks so much. I appreciate it, Dan. So many valuable insights from this discussion with Dan. I love his framing that AI is not a tool, it's an agent. A tool does what you designed it to do. An agent has the ability to go out and make decisions and find connections on its own. That distinction changes how we think about everything, from quality assurance to team building to what skills we actually need. His approach to using faculty grants that required peer education sessions was a brilliant way to get faculty to train each other on real use cases across disciplines. That kind of collaborative learning is so much more effective than top-down mandates. And I loved his crossword puzzle analogy that you stare at a problem and feel stuck, but then you get one little piece and you can build on it and it starts to gain momentum. That's exactly what happens when you get diverse teams learning together. But what really stuck with me was his point about AI delivering B plus work and how it's on us to articulate why human expertise turns that into an A. He's right that we don't quite have the language for that yet, and we need to figure it out proactively because our bosses and clients are going to look for savings whether we're ready or not. And I think his honesty about brain fry is something we all need to hear. When every minute of your day becomes cognitively demanding because AI has eliminated the routine tasks, we have to be intentional about creating space to recharge. Take a walk, learn something completely outside your field, step away from the screen. That's where the breakthroughs actually happen. Please reach out to me with unique ways that you're integrating AI into your professional and personal lives. And as always, blue skies and keep creating.